I'm Georgia and this is The Sound of Georgia. Well, I went back to the theatre last week and I love doing these sorts of videos because honestly they're pretty easy to film. All I've got to do is talk about what I saw. So today I'm going to be talking about the big one, Phantom of the Opera. And the timing's a little bit ironic because it's actually leaving Broadway next year, which honestly I am shocked. I thought that would be playing at the Majestic Theatre until the universe ended, but apparently not. No show is safe, people. Also, before we get started on talking about the musical, I do need to talk about something else. That something else being this hot mess of a sequel that Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote many years later. And yes, it is a hot mess. But I need to talk about it before we get any further because I love it. I absolutely love Love Never Dies. I think it's kind of similar to Harry Potter and the Cursed Child in a lot of ways. Is it completely unnecessary? Yes. Did it come too many years late to really be seriously considered a sequel? Probably. Is it totally fanficky? Yes. Does it retcon so much from the original story? You bet. But as a theatre experience, it is incredible. And yes, I did actually see it in the theatre. I haven't just watched the first shot. And so I would absolutely recommend going and seeing both of these shows if you can. Even if you think the story's total and utter rubbish, definitely go and see them if you can. However, unlike The Cursed Child, I actually do consider Love Never Dies canon. I know, but it's the honest truth. This musical was my first real introduction to the world of the Phantom of the Opera, or at least Andrew Lloyd Webber's version, and I am Team Eric. I will get more into that later, but for those two reasons, I absolutely love this hot mess of a sequel. All of this to say, my feelings on Love Never Dies very much impact my feelings on Phantom of the Opera, and I just wanted to get all that out before we go any further. So if you think Love Never Dies is the worst thing to happen to musical theatre since ever, and Andrew Lloyd Webber can do nothing worse, then you may not want to stick around. So here is my one-sentence review of this musical. It is amazing, you should go see it. Now let's get into the details a bit more. Also, there's going to be spoilers. Being Phantom, this was really hard to get tickets to. I had to go through the Sydney Opera House website rather than Ticketmaster. I looked around for a while, and the only seats I could find were in the dress circle. If you've seen some of my other musical reviews, you know that I'm not the biggest fan of the dress circle. But here, I loved it. The reason why I don't usually like dress circles is not only would I rather look at the stage straight on, though that is definitely part of it, but the angle gives me a bit of anxiety and a bit of vertigo. But I barely noticed that at all during the performance, and our seats made the end of Act 1, when the chandelier drops, perfect. It's hard to tell exactly what they did with the chandelier, given it obviously varies from production to production and theatre to theatre, but with our production I don't think it actually crashed right onto the stage. I just think it dropped quite a bit in a very short span of time. But from where we were sitting in the dress circle, it looked like it had crashed onto the stage. So that was amazing. It's still mildly terrifying though. Everybody was amazing. And I was also quite glad to see that I'd never heard of any of them before. I didn't get a chance to check the cast boards too much, but I know we had Josh Pitterman, Amy Manford, and Blake Bowden, who were the principals for Eric, Christine, and Raoul respectively, and they were amazing. Amy, her voice is absolutely gorgeous, and she killed it with Wishing He Was Somehow Here Again, which is my favourite song. Blake did a great job as Raoul. Raoul is definitely not my favourite character in the show. I think as a character he's pretty boring, but Blake didn't seem too boring, and definitely didn't seem annoying. Because that's the other thing about Raoul. I think he can kind of be a jerk. So let's talk about Eric, because I kind of have a lot to say about him. And for those who are lost right now, Eric is the Phantom. It's not mentioned in the musical, but it is canon according to the original book that his name is Eric, which is what I've always called him, because he is hands down my favourite character in the show. Josh absolutely nailed it. Once again, amazing voice, and every time Eric was hurting, I was hurting. When he popped up from behind the headstone ornament thing at the end of All I Ask of You, all I wanted to do was give him a hug. When the lights came on at the end of the show, I left the auditorium just wanting to give him a hug. The reason Eric is my favourite character is because I find him very interesting and connect with him on a very personal level. The backstory of the Phantom of the Opera becoming the person that he is because nobody ever treated him with any sort of kindness solely because of his disability breaks my heart and makes me very angry because I am disabled and I get it. And yes, I am serious. Eric is disabled. Whatever deformity, disfiguration he has could absolutely be classified as a disability. I don't condone all the murders Eric did over the course of his life, but I hate every single person who was so horrible to him. I've been there with people treating me not so nicely because of my disability. So Eric's struggle is very personal to me, which is why he's my favourite character and why I'm Team Eric. Obviously, I realise that a relationship between Eric and Christine, or anyone really, would be beyond toxic, but being with Christine would make him happy, and all I want is for the Phantom of the Opera to be happy. So I ship them together more for his sake than the two of them. Sorry to be kind of boring. Honestly, Raoul and Christine's relationship reminds me a lot of Eliza and Freddie's in My Fair Lady. Just not quite as bad. Raoul isn't quite as bland as Freddie is, and his relationship with Christine definitely has a foundation that Eliza and Freddie's does not, since they knew each other as kids, but it's still insta-love. So now I want to talk about the sets, because, at least for our production, they were interesting. Obviously, the only other reference I have for Phantom of the Opera sets is from the 25th anniversary Royal Albert Hall Pro Shot, and that one is definitely an outlier when it comes to the sets. The sets were all amazing. There were some things that I thought were incredible about the sets, like Eric's basement lair. When he's leading Christine down there during the title song, the set actually looked like steps. It looked exactly like it was steps carved into stone going down to a basement. But we didn't have any candles rising from the floor. No, I know that usually happens, but it didn't with us. Then there was the ending of Act 1 where Eric kills Bouquet. The way the stage had it set up was like one half of the stage was the in-universe opera populaire stage, and the other half of the stage was backstage, which meant that you could see exactly what Eric was doing. So it maybe wasn't quite as suspenseful as it could have been, I guess, because the way it was staged, you could clearly see what Eric was doing. So while the dancers were obviously a bit surprised when a corpse sort of flies onto the stage, you as the audience member aren't. The reason I bring it up as being kind of weird was because at the end of Act 2, when we have Point of No Return, when Piangi gets killed, he obviously gets killed in the same way with the Punjab Lasso thing. That wasn't staged the same way. Obviously, if you know the story, you know what's coming, but if you don't, you're just like the in-universe audience, and you don't see it until after it's happened. All this to say, I don't know why these two scenes where Eric is doing the exact same thing were staged so differently so we could see exactly what he's up to in one and not in the other. Piangi's death was a bit more suspenseful, a bit more shocking. Also, with Think of Me, the in-universe opera boxes are on the stage themselves. I know my mum and I were trying to guess which box Raoul would be sitting in during that song, because we thought he would be sitting in the audience itself. But no, on the stage. If I sound like I'm ragging on the sets, I'm not. I love them. They were just a little interesting and unexpected in how they did certain scenes. And during those couple of things where somebody's reading the note that Eric has written, and it transforms into Eric's voice, they had speakers all over the place. So Eric's voice was indeed coming everywhere. With one sentence, his voice would be on one side of the theatre, and almost instantaneously, it'd be on the other side of the theatre, which was insane, creepy and awesome. Now, obviously, I can't talk about Phantom of the Opera without answering this question. Is it overrated? I don't know. I completely understand both arguments. I could completely see why people would think it is the best musical in the universe ever, and I can also see why people would think it's overrated. I absolutely loved it, but I certainly did not think it was the greatest musical to ever exist ever. When looking at it from a really strict and narrow lens, me walking out not thinking it was complete and utter perfection, then I would have to say it's the teensiest bit overrated, but looking at it from just that angle I think is a bit unfair. So I'm going to say, I don't know. I would say go and see it and draw your own conclusions. You should definitely go and see it because it is amazing, not just simply to say I've seen Phantom of the Opera. So there are my thoughts on Phantom of the Opera. I guess it was supposed to be about the Australian production, but it turned out to be more just the musical in general, because honestly I had a lot of feelings on this musical before last week. But our cast and crew was amazing, and I am glad I got to see them do it. That's everything I've got for today. Of course, the big question I have to ask you, have you seen Phantom? And if you have, what do you think of it? Utter perfection or overrated? What's your favourite song? How do you feel about Eric? I don't condone all those murders he did, but he is so relatable for me, and I am so empathetic for him. If you haven't seen Phantom, definitely go and see it, if you can. If you can't get tickets, watch the 25th anniversary production. It's as best as you're gonna get outside of the theatre. And even if you have seen it at the theatre, still go watch it. Stay safe, guys. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my video next time. So long, farewell!